Welcome to the History in Focus channel. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this one. In this photo, the bustling Dodge City, Kansas, accurately captures the classic spirit of the American Old West. In 1872, Dodge City was an important commercial center, supplying travelers and buffalo hunters. The storefronts were rustic, offering guns, ammunition, and tools, a hallmark of pioneer entrepreneurship in the West. The scene illustrates the height of American expansion in the famous land filled with challenges and opportunities of the West. In this photograph, the Texas Rangers pose in front of a grocery store in Cotulla, Texas. As a law enforcement force with jurisdiction throughout the state, the Rangers became symbols of the Old West, depicted in books and magazines of the time, representing courage and the pursuit of justice in an era of untamed frontiers and constant dangers that shaped the history of Texas and the United States. In this photo, horse-drawn carriages travel through the busy streets of Longacre Square around the year 1900. This area would be renamed Times Square in April of 1904 in honor of the New York Times, which had moved its headquarters there. Today, it is one of the largest entertainment centers in the world, but back then, it reflected a much quieter New York. This image shows iconic Wall Street in the 1860s, a place very different from what we know today. During this period, veterans were seeking jobs, but the recession of 1866 made employment difficult. The streets were filled with horse-drawn carriages, while the tall skyscrapers were still far from emerging. This image captures the famous celebration of VJ Day on August 14, 1945, in Times Square, New York, when the victory over Japan brought euphoria to the streets. Photographer Alfred Eisenstadt captured the iconic kiss between a sailor and a nurse, which symbolizes the joy and freedom of the end of World War II. At that time, the city was immersed in a mood of exaltation and hope, with the population celebrating a moment of renewal for the world. In this photo from 1949, a family gathers around the television, a new and fascinating object that would revolutionize the era. American families began to gather around the screen, creating unique moments of leisure and connection, with the first TV broadcasts gaining popularity in cities like Erie, Pennsylvania. Before school buses, there were school wagons. In 1900, one of these wagons, filled with children, was headed to a school near Lexington, Kentucky. Without motors or paved roads, children traveled outdoors, facing the weather and dirt paths. This image shows a black Union soldier from the United States Colored Troops resting in front of a slave auction house, marked by the sign reading, "Auction and Sales of Negroes." The scene, taken in 1864 on Whitehall Street in Atlanta, served as a reminder of the struggle for freedom and the weight of slavery, capturing this emblematic moment. Here's an interesting fact: fire trucks used to be drawn by horses, as shown in this image. The cart rushes quickly down 72nd Street and Broadway, heading towards a fire in New York. Around 1910, this method was the most efficient for emergencies, with agile teams and fast horses navigating urban chaos. Here, the iconic singer and dancer Josephine Baker famously uses an ostrich to pull her carriage in an image dating back to 1920. Known for her bold and unusual style, Baker not only delighted audiences with her dance, but also surprised with iconic acts like this, becoming a cultural icon of her time. In this photo, skaters enjoy a traditional winter activity in Central Park in 1943, which would later become Woolman Rink. The frozen setting was a window into life in New York at the time, where ice skating became a popular leisure activity, bringing the city to life during the colder months. This image captured the daring Betty and Benny Fox aerial team performing a risky stunt in Washington, D.C. They balanced on an improvised platform atop a building, defying gravity in an extreme display of courage. This type of performance, popular in the 1950s, marked audacity and a fascination with extreme feats, embodying the adventurous and thrilling spirit that characterized American culture at the time. In this 1950 photo, models in swimsuits relax on the sand of a beach in Florida. The image shows the laid-back style of the time, with women enjoying the sun in classic swimwear, reflecting the popularity of beach vacations in the United States during the 1950s. Under the sun of Florida, elegantly dressed bathers enjoy a leisurely day in Palm Beach. Captured in 1905, this photo shows that formal attire still dominated at the time, even at the seaside, with women holding parasols and men wearing hats and suits. This photo shows Daytona Beach in 1957, where vintage cars were common, even driving on the sand. It was a popular destination, with visitors enjoying the sun and sea while cruising by car, capturing the spirit of the era: fun, freedom, and the unique charm of post-war American beaches. In this photo, we see an officer interacting with Hotfoot Teddy, the bear cub who inspired the famous Smokey Bear character. Captured in 1950, the image brought up a funny moment, as if little Teddy was already preparing to become a star. This image shows an animated Saturday night dance in Clayville, Rhode Island in 1940. The square dance, with its coordinated steps and contagious rhythms, gathered young people and couples for a moment of pure joy and tradition. A snapshot of a simple life, but filled with the energetic spirit of the 1940s. This image captures workers enjoying a break at the New Cafe near the entrance to Camp Livingston in Alexandria, Louisiana, in December of 1940. The spot had become a gathering place for the men, relaxing with a Coca-Cola while sharing stories. In this photograph, Muhammad Ali poses outside the Alvin Theater, where The Great White Hope was playing in 1968. The film, which dealt with racial issues in boxing, reflected Ali's spirit of resistance and his fight outside the ring, symbolizing the major cultural transformation of the 1960s in the United States. With his fist raised, he not only showcased his champion stance, but also challenged the status quo of the time. In this image, Dot and Betty, mother and daughter, members of Motormaids, pose on their motorcycles in New Hampshire in 1947. Dressed in eye-catching uniforms, they showed the strength and adventurous spirit of women in the 1940s, beginning to claim their place in a predominantly male world. This image shows the innovative Mercury train of the New York Central Railroad passing by Syracuse City Hall in 1936. With its futuristic and aerodynamic design, the Streamliner represented the forefront of transportation technology, capturing the energy of the golden age of American railroads. In this photo, men wait in a breadline during the Great Depression of 1929 in New York. The major cities were not immune to the hardships of the time, and many people without jobs faced the struggle for survival. Breadlines, run by private charities, were not enough to feed everyone, but they were one of the few sources of help for the most needy of that period. In this photo, two girls enjoy a Coca-Cola at the counter of a bar before a movie screening. At the time, there was a simplicity and lightness to bar gatherings in the 1940s, where friends came together to share relaxed and lively moments. The youth met in these places, exchanging laughs and creating memories in a time when life seemed simpler and filled with small joys. This photo captured the interior of a general store and pool room in Stem, North Carolina in 1940. The simple and welcoming environment served as a meeting point for locals, where, in addition to buying goods, they could have fun and socialize while playing a game of pool. In this photo taken in Franklin, Georgia in 1941, the community gathers around the pool table inside the general store. With shelves filled with products, the space was a reflection of everyday life at the time, where work and play intertwined in a single community environment. This photo shows a bell system operator redirecting calls, an essential service in the United States in the year 1942. Before automated telephony, operators manually connected calls as seen here with their switchboard full of buttons and wires. Here is the iconic Midwest Cafe in September of 1941 on the main street of Craig, Colorado. With cars parked out front and a vibrant urban lifestyle, the place exuded the energy of a thriving city full of opportunities. A symbol of expansion and optimism during an era marked by progress and modernization in the American West. This was what bowling was like in 1942 in the town of Bantam, Connecticut. Each night was marked by competition and friendship, where players gathered, focused on their throws, and laughed on wooden benches. This image shows a street in Hettinger, North Dakota, covered in snow after a major snowstorm in 1942. The scene is dominated by the bright Coca-Cola sign, highlighting a warm and welcoming environment amidst the fluffy snow of the location. This photo portrays high school students in Stem, North Carolina, dressed impeccably for Election Day on May 25, 1940. The simple and welcoming environment of the store reflected the everyday life in the small town, where young people gathered, sharing stories and preparing to take part in an important civic event. This photo shows the interior of a general store in Langtree, Texas, in 1939, a simple and welcoming environment. The shelves were filled with cans and various products, while the counter served as a meeting point for conversations and purchases with the local citizens. This type of store was essential for rural life in the United States, functioning as a hub for exchanging news and socializing, where every customer knew they could find what was needed for daily life. In this image, we see Langtree, Texas's general store with its simple and rustic facade, a symbol of life in the West. An interesting fact is that the use of signs in both English and Spanish was a reflection of the presence of Latinos in the area, as the state of Texas had originally belonged to Mexico before being purchased by the United States in 1845. In this photo, we see a typical gas station in Reedsville, West Virginia. The image from June of 1935 evokes nostalgia with its old and stylish gas pumps, signs from brands like Goodyear and Pontiac, and the simple, welcoming atmosphere of the place. These stations were more than just a place to refuel. They were meeting points with a rustic charm in a time when life seemed more peaceful and humanly connected. This image shows how Postal Service looked in July of 1941 in Siren, Wisconsin. The simple counter and personal service reflect a time when mail was a vital connection for communities, with attendants who knew their customers and services performed in a close and efficient manner. In this image, men from Brooklyn, drafted for military service, are leaving the Long Island RR Terminal on Flatbush Avenue, heading to Camp Upton in September of 1917. It was a time of great mobilization during World War I, when young men were sent for military training, leaving families and friends with uncertain looks and emotional farewells. This photo of the United States Capitol in the 1870s reveals one of the country's most iconic landmarks, with its cast iron dome already erected in the 1850s and 1860s. The building, which began in 1793, already showed signs of grandeur and would become an eternal symbol of American democracy. In this photo, crowds of men gather in front of the New York Tribune building in 1884. With their suits and hats, they eagerly awaited the latest news from the newspapers of the time, when traditional press still played a crucial role in shaping public opinion and the urban culture of New York. This image shows uniformed officers with riding boots walking down 42nd Street in New York in a time of modernization. Their uniforms, with straight-cut coats, tall hats, and boots, symbolized discipline and order in the growing city. In this Saturday afternoon scene, in the quiet town of Welch, McDowell County, West Virginia, a busy street filled with cars and people can be seen. This is a snapshot of how urban life was in that era, capturing the energy of a small American town during the 1940s. This photo from 1936 shows the River Hill Cafe in Alabama with its Drink Coca-Cola sign. At the time, cafes like this were social gathering spots where people not only enjoyed a cold Coca-Cola, but also chatted, relaxed, and shared moments of leisure. In this scene, we see a city fruit stand with a Coca-Cola sign, reflecting the charm of small American towns of the time in May of 1942 in Alabama. The scene conveyed a sense of tranquility, with vintage cars parked and people strolling calmly on the sidewalk, capturing the peaceful and welcoming spirit of that era. On the shores of the Potomac River, a group of friends poses casually, wearing the fashionable bathing suits of the 1920s. The scene shows a moment of leisure and companionship as women's fashion began to transform, reflecting the freedom and social changes that marked the 1920s in the United States. This image captured the moment when these 5 awkward men compete in a walking race, a popular sporting attraction in 1886. It was the beginning of a growing interest in outdoor activities and community events in the United States, as sports began to gain popularity among the masses. Here, a group of young bathers walk in single file down the beach, wearing traditional swimsuits from the year 1886. With the sea in the background and seaside leisure beginning to gain popularity in those years, the scene reflected the first steps of fun and leisure at American beaches. In this photo, a woman works with a welding machine in a naval aircraft factory in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, around 1918. During World War I, many women entered the workforce, taking essential roles in war factories, contributing significantly to the war effort. This image shows a one-room school typical of the South United States in the mid-1900s. At the time, children had to walk long distances to attend school, and with only one teacher for all levels of education, these simple schools were the heart of rural education. In this photo, the vibrant St. Charles Avenue in New Orleans was a true cultural melting pot in the mid-1990s. Horse-drawn carriages glided between elegant commercial buildings and imposing hotels, while streetcars ran along the tracks connecting different parts of the city. In this photo, a boy wearing a ruffled shirt, cloak, and fur hat poses mounted on a horse in the garden of a house with imposing columns. The image highlights the child's curiosity and confidence with his mount, while the grand architectural background offers a glimpse of the contrast between childhood and the elegance of the era in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. In this photo, we see children in a rural school in Dunklin County, Missouri, in July of 1942. The typical classrooms of the time were simple, with students sitting disciplined in their desks, all with their notebooks and books. The children, well-dressed and with respectful postures, reflected the care for education and the organization that were characteristics of rural schools in the interior of the United States. Here, 5 stylish young men pose in front of a pool hall in Roscoe, South Dakota. With an air of confidence, they show off their energy and pride, typical of a time when the streets of the small town were the stage for encounters and youthful exuberance. The photo, captured in February of 1942, showed the essence of youth, finding freedom in local hangouts. In these images, hundreds of pedestrians crowd to watch the New York subway after an underground fire occurred beneath Broadway at West 55th Street on January 6, 1915. The fire, caused by an electrical short circuit, was confined to 2 manholes in the system. In this image, a general merchandise store in Princeton, Illinois, presents its brick facade and windows full of goods, a thriving local business in the 19th century. Horses and carriages parked outside showed how transportation and commerce were connected back then. These stores were essential centers for communities, offering everything from fabrics and clothing to household items, vital for the daily lives of Americans. During the snowstorm of February 1920 that paralyzed New York, markets on West Street continued to operate amid the chaos. Surrounded by snow-covered carriages and wagons, merchants and customers braved the extreme cold to keep business alive. In this photo, a family group poses for a hunting expedition in Champlain, New York. Dressed in formal attire with the hunted animal in front of them, they showcase how hunting was part of leisure and culture in America at the end of the 19th century. In this photo, a family poses in front of their home in Texas, a snapshot of rural life in the year 1918. An interesting fact is that, at the time, large cameras required several minutes to capture an image, which explains their serious poses and the lack of smiles in the picture. Sitting in front of a train loaded with logs, pioneers of the West cross a narrow and precarious wooden bridge over deep ravines in the majestic Cascade Mountains in Oregon in 1906. In this image, two large overland stagecoaches cross a bridge towards the famous town of Deadwood, South Dakota, in the year 1889. The horses advance over the rudimentary bridge of the time, while men aboard wave or raise their hats in greeting to the photographer, creating a unique moment. In this photo, a couple takes a break while the husband carries buckets on a rocky terrain. The image shows the older man using a wooden yoke on his shoulders to balance his filled buckets, while the woman next to him rests. Taken in Mansfield, Vermont in the 19th century, the scene shows the hardship of daily work at the time and the ingenuity needed to face these almost daily challenges. In this image, a man poses next to his horse in front of a barn in Springfield, Massachusetts. The scene, typical of the late 19th century, showed the importance of horses as essential partners in rural life. They were used for both transportation and agricultural work, symbolizing the connection between people and the land before the mechanization we have today. Here, a saddled horse is transported in a truck from one ranch to another in Texas in 1939. In a time of transition, the photograph shows the adaptation of rural activities to modernity, with cars and trucks beginning to play an important role in the daily life of America's countryside. In this photo, we see the former saloon and courtroom of Judge Roy Bean in Langtry, Texas in 1939. With a simple structure weathered by time, the location was a reflection of the harshness of life in the Wild West. It was one of the centers where law and entertainment met in this remote town, where survival required courage and action. In this image, coal cars move from the mine to the tipple in Mullins, West Virginia. At the height of the coal industry in the United States, the mines were centers of hard work, vital to the economy and growth of the country during the 20th century. In this image, Bill Daniels, a miner, and his two daughters are on the porch of their three-room house, where they paid an incredible $7 per month in 1935. The house had no running water, and the bathroom, in poor condition, was shared by 4 or 5 families. Here, 3 boys run alongside an elephant from the Barnes Circus as it makes its way down Atlantic Street in Brooklyn, New York, in June of 1891. Surprised and perhaps scared by the immense attraction, they watch the incredible elephant march down the street, as the circus was responsible for bringing the exotic and the adventurous to local communities. Here we see Central Square in Keene, New Hampshire, around 1905. The main street of the town displayed a charming scene with horse-drawn carriages, leafy trees, and the charming architecture of early 20th century American towns. In this image, ballerinas balance in the window of George Balanchine's ballet school in New York in 1937. The image shows the artistic and vibrant atmosphere of 1930s New York, marked by the pursuit of perfection and innovation. In this photo, girls jump off a stone wall in Fort Greene Park in Brooklyn in 1886. The park, one of the first public spaces in the city, was a gathering place for young people and families, with a setting where vibrant energy and outdoor fun were an essential part of daily life. This image captures the energy and joy of children during a race on Independence Day in Vail, Oregon in 1941. The summer heat, the freedom to play outdoors, and the purity of American childhood that year are almost tangible. In this photo, Raymond Schuyler and his 4 children enjoy a snowy day, showing how an American family created special moments back then. In the winter of 1904 in Worcester, Massachusetts, the children played on sleds and carts, while the father shared the warmth of family unity. In this photo, a group of women poses on the staircase of a house in Corning, New York. Dressed in 19th century attire, including long dresses with aprons and details, they represented the everyday life of the time, when women were essential in managing households and communities. Their clothing showed a tone of practicality and modest style typical of that period in the United States. This photo shows an abandoned store in Cheneysville, Pennsylvania, a former thriving mining town. The deteriorating building in December of 1937 marked the end of an era, as the collapse of the local mining industry left behind a town in decline. Here, the daughter of a miner fetches water from the spring at the Big Jim Coal Company in Blanche, Kentucky. The distance to the water was a daily challenge for the workers, and in addition, everyone used the same buckets, dirty or not, highlighting the harsh and precarious living conditions in the American mining camps of the time. In this image, we see a group of young women sunbathing at the public pool in Caldwell, Idaho, in July of 1941. The summer heat was on, and they spent their time outdoors, spreading towels and applying olive oil to their skin as they enjoyed the afternoon sun. In this photo, American soldiers stand guard on a troop train, a typical scene from World War II. At that time, the United States was deeply involved in the global conflict, with soldiers constantly being transported to battlefronts. The use of these trains to move large military contingents was common, highlighting the enormous mobilization effort involving the entire country. The iconic photo of the Hatfield clan posing in front of their house in West Virginia around 1897. Known for their legendary rivalry with the McCoys of Kentucky, the conflict, which started soon after the Civil War, marked the end of the 19th century as one of the most emblematic episodes in American folklore, amid family disputes and the expansion of the United States frontiers westward. In this photo, riders follow a Texas road in the busy life of the West during the Great Depression of 1929. The barren and vast landscape was a reflection of the harshness of the dry terrain. At a time when roads were still primitive, the horse was essential for getting around, serving as one of the main symbols of rural life and adventure in the interior of the United States. These photos show what the Flatiron Building, opened in 1902 in New York, looked like as one of the city's first modern architectural wonders. In the image, we see the uniquely shaped corner building, initially called the Fuller Building, standing out amidst a New York that was beginning to transform, yet still had horses and carriages dominating the streets, for example. This photograph captured bold tourists hanging out of the windows of the crown of the Statue of Liberty in 1951, waving out, culminating in a beautiful and daring image. The visitors' boldness and their fascination with the monument offered a unique view of the New York population, known for its courage and fearless spirit, always ready to embrace adventure and challenge limits. Enveloped in a haze of smoke and steam, the busy Delaware Avenue comes to life in this photograph, captured in the year 1908. The sound of carriage bells and streetcar noises created an urban symphony we can almost hear today, while street vendors offered their goods to pedestrians. It was truly a Philadelphia in transformation, where tradition and development coexisted for the city's progress. Amid the busy hustle of daily life, a young newsboy holds his newspapers in the center of St. Louis. On a Saturday afternoon in 1900, he tried to catch the attention of passing people, offering them fresh news, a profession that has now vanished in America. In this photo, the 12th Street drawbridge in Chicago rises majestically to allow the passage of boats navigating the waters of Lake Michigan in the mid-1900s. The industrial setting and the constant movement of boats and trains marked the peak of the Industrial Revolution in the city, highlighting Chicago as one of the leading centers of progress at the time.